last month at Interior.
Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis traveled to North Carolina this week to announce $119 million in available funding for locally led conservation projects to restore our nation's lands and waters through the 2024 America the Beautiful Challenge. The challenge advances President Biden's America the Beautiful initiative, which set the nation's first ever goal to conserve and restore 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030. The acting deputy secretary also traveled to Kentucky this week, where she announced $74.2 million from the president's Investing in America agenda to address dangerous and polluting abandoned mines, create good-paying, family-sustaining jobs, and catalyze economic opportunity in the state. She toured mine remediation sites with Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement Principal Deputy Director Sharon Bacino. Interior this week released draft guidance on how states can apply for up to $30 million each in matching grants to create jobs and clean up polluting and unsafe orphaned oil and gas wells across the country. Orphaned oil and gas wells are polluting backyards, recreation areas, and community spaces, and methane leaking from such wells is a significant contributor to climate change. Interior and the National Park Service this week announced a $195 million investment from the President's Investing in America agenda for climate restoration and resilience projects over the next decade, protecting America's national parks for generations to come. National parks across the United States will use this funding to prepare for the impacts of climate change, protect species, restore ecosystems, and invest in conservation jobs. Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife and Parks Shannon Estenos traveled to Arizona to announce $10.3 million from the President's Investing in America agenda to restore Arizona's lands and waters through locally led landscape-scale restoration projects. The funding is part of the recently announced $157 million in investments from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is supporting 206 ecosystem restoration projects across the country. Assistant Secretary Estenos later traveled to Grand Canyon National Park to tour projects being funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act to restore ecosystems, upgrade infrastructure, and keep visitors safe. Administration leaders, including Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis and Interior Solicitor Bob Anderson, joined state and tribal leaders this week to celebrate an historic agreement to restore wild salmon, steelhead, and other native fish populations in the Columbia River. The agreement also expands tribally sponsored clean energy production and provides stability for communities that depend on the Columbia River system for agriculture, energy, recreation, and transportation. The U.S. Geological Survey this week launched its new online tool for science critical to the future management of one of the nation's most vital waterways. The Colorado River Basin Science Collaboration Portal is part of a new effort that brings together expertise and data to support decision-making related to drought impacts in the Colorado River Basin, which provides water to nearly 40 million people across 250,000 square miles of the American West. The Bureau of Land Management this week announced the approval of the right-of-way for the Alta Wind Battery Energy Storage System in Kern County, California. The project is designed to deliver 150 megawatts of electricity to the California power grid, store up to 1,200 megawatts, and increase the availability of clean power produced by the existing Alta Wind Energy Center. This week, we mark not one, but two important anniversaries. The U.S. Geological Survey marks 145 years of service this year. Founded on March 3, 1879, USGS studies the landscape of the United States, its natural resources, and the natural hazards that threaten it, providing quality scientific information to the public and to decision makers. And on March 3, 1849, Congress established the United States Department of the Interior. For 175 years, dedicated public servants have worked to deliver for the American people. Every day we fulfill our mission to steward America's vast public lands and resources, honor our trust and treaty responsibilities with tribal nations, and tell America's story for past, present, and future generations. Here's to many more years to come. And our social media picture of the week. Talk about right place, right time. We see this beautiful bohemian waxwing in Alaska caught in the act of grabbing a snack. Waxwings are songbirds known for their sleek plumage and distinctive markings, and in winter they love to hang out with their buddies and pluck berries. including those that have undergone fermentation due to the cold temperatures. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.
Last month at Interior.
Secretary Haaland and Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Brian Newland visited the Hopi tribe in Arizona this week, where they announced $72 million from President Biden's Investing in America agenda to help tribal communities electrify their homes. Under the Office of Indian Affairs Tribal Electrification Program, 21 tribes will receive financial and technical assistance in this first round of funding. In New Mexico, the leaders visited the White Mountain Apache tribe and the Pueblo of Zuni, where they highlighted how historic resources from the President's Investing in America agenda are supporting indigenous communities. Secretary Haaland and U.S. Geological Survey Director Dave Applegate joined members of the Federal Advisory Council for Climate Adaptation Science for the Council's inaugural meeting in Washington, D.C. Created to help address the growing impacts of the climate crisis, the Council will bridge the work of USGS's Climate Adaptation Science Centers, which bring a regional focus to the Department's climate action, with natural and cultural resource management partners nationwide. The Council will also be crucial in ensuring that historically marginalized and underserved communities don't face the challenge of adaptation alone. Secretary Haaland delivered remarks this week at a White House roundtable on increasing capital access for tribal nations, which gathered leaders from across the Biden-Harris administration and the philanthropic and financial services sectors. The Secretary highlighted how Interior is acting on President Biden's Executive Order 14112, which calls on federal agencies to ensure funding for tribes is accessible, flexible, and equitable. Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis and Biden-Harris administration leaders this week announced a significant milestone in the ongoing efforts to protect the stability and sustainability of the Colorado River system and strengthen water security in the West. Thanks to historic investments from President Biden's Investing in America agenda, including 3 new water savings agreements in California, the department successfully staved off the immediate collapse of this precious resource and closed out its short-term efforts to protect water levels in Lakes Mead and Powell through 2026. The department is continuing to work with tribes, basin states, and other parties across the Colorado River Basin on long-term conservation efforts. The Departments of the Interior and Justice this week released their response to the Not Invisible Act Commission's recommendations on how to combat the crisis of missing and murdered indigenous peoples. Secretary Haaland, who championed the law creating the commission, hailed its work to identify recommendations created by Indian country for Indian country. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service this week reported that the wild population of Mexican wolves grew in 2023 for the 8th consecutive year, the longest streak since recovery efforts began in 1998. The 2023 population census revealed a minimum of 257 Mexican wolves distributed across Arizona and New Mexico, a 6% increase over the 2022 count. The National Park Service this week announced the projected peak bloom date for the cherry blossoms at the National Mall and Memorial Parks in Washington, D.C., sometime between March 23rd and March 26th, which is 8 days earlier than average thanks to a mostly mild winter. More than 1.5 million visitors turn out every year to take in the blossoms and the National Cherry Blossom Festival, which runs from March 20th through April 14th. This week, Secretary Haaland interviewed White House Counsel and Environmental Quality Chair Brenda Mallory on Instagram Live to mark Women's History Month and discuss how Interior and CEQ work together to address challenges like environmental injustice across our country. Since 2021, the National Park Service has invested more than $19 million in infrastructure and preservation projects for parks commemorating women across the nation. Interior has also awarded $2.1 million in Historic Preservation Fund grants for sites that are helping tell women's history. And our social media picture of the week, this stunning image of killer whales swimming in Puget Sound off the coast of San Juan Islands National Monument in Washington, is just one of a number of breathtaking sights you can find here, along with exhilarating recreational opportunities and unforgettable memories. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.
last month at Interior.
The Biden-Harris administration this week submitted the president's budget request for fiscal year 2025. That proposal includes a total of $18 billion for Interior, with critical targeted investments in the American people that will promote greater prosperity and economic growth for decades to come. The proposal includes investments to support wildland firefighters and wildfire management, address challenges exacerbated by climate change, fight drought and address ongoing water challenges, strengthen tribal nations and support indigenous communities, and create jobs while moving clean energy forward. Secretary Haaland, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management Director Elizabeth Klein, and Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement Director Kevin Sly were in Long Island this week to celebrate the completion of construction for the South Fork Wind Project. At full capacity, the approximately 130-megawatt offshore wind farm will generate enough clean energy to power approximately 70,000 homes and will eliminate up to 6 million tons of carbon emissions over the life of the project, the equivalent of taking 60,000 cars off the road for the next 20 years. Secretary Haaland, Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife and Parks Shannon Estenos, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director Martha Williams were in Florida this week celebrating the establishment of the Everglades to Gulf Conservation Area. The 4 million-acre conservation area will provide crucial protected wildlife corridors, enhance outdoor recreation access to the public, and bolster climate resilience in Southwest Florida. It's the 571st and newest unit of the National Wildlife Refuge System, which marks its 121st birthday this week. Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis was in Southern California this week, where she toured several projects funded through President Biden's Investing in America agenda, aimed at addressing legacy pollution and advancing drought resilience. She visited 2 sites where the state is using $25 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law to address methane-leaking orphaned oil and gas wells. She also visited the Goleta Water District, where a $2 million investment through the Bureau of Reclamation is supporting drought resiliency work to drill a new groundwater well, which will provide 800 gallons a minute to the region. Interior this week celebrated congressional finalization of amendments to the Compacts of Free Association. The $6.5 billion assistance packages will provide 20 years of new economic assistance to the freely associated states, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Republic of Palau, and Federated States of Micronesia. Secretary Haaland called the strong ties between the United States and the Pacific Islands the foundation of our engagement and presence in the Pacific. Interior this week announced that more than $120 million from the President's Investing in America agenda will fund 146 projects to help tribal communities plan for and implement projects to tackle severe climate-related environmental threats to their homelands. This investment from the Inflation Reduction Act, bipartisan infrastructure law, and annual appropriations, it's a critical step toward enabling tribes to proactively plan to adapt to these threats and safely relocate critical community infrastructure. Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Brian Newland traveled to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota this week, where he highlighted the Investing in America agenda at the groundbreaking of the Oglala Dam Rehabilitation Project, which is funded by the President's bipartisan infrastructure law. That law is helping make crucial investments to protect downstream communities, improve dam safety, and restore an important local water supply for the Pine Ridge community. Overall, the bipartisan infrastructure law invests $13 billion directly in tribes throughout the United States, including $250 million over 5 years to address irrigation, power systems, dam safety, and water sanitation. The Bureau of Land Management this week announced a draft plan to strengthen greater sage-grouse conservation and management on public lands. Greater sage-grouse rely on sagebrush lands for all aspects of their life cycle to meet seasonal needs for food, cover, and reproduction. A local population may need up to 40 square miles of intact landscape to stay healthy. The plan is built on decades of partnership, research, and on-the-ground knowledge and experience in maintaining, protecting, and restoring healthy sagebrush habitats. The National Park Service joined the U.S. Postal Service this week for the unveiling of the newest set of Forever stamps at the Underground Railroad Visitor Center in Church Creek, Maryland. The stamps honor 10 courageous men and women who helped guide enslaved people to freedom via the Underground Railroad, a network of secret routes and safe houses in use before the Civil War. And our social media picture of the week, the magical colors and textures of the hoodoos at Utah's Bryce Canyon National Park. What are hoodoos? They're the mysterious rock formations that are formed by water and ice, and Bryce Canyon has more hoodoos than anywhere else on Earth. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.
Last month at Interior.
Secretary Haaland traveled to Fayetteville, Arkansas this week to highlight how President Biden's Investing in America agenda and America the Beautiful initiative are restoring our nation's lands and waters and creating healthier outdoor spaces for people and wildlife. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has been awarded a nearly $4 million grant through the America the Beautiful Challenge for the War Eagle Creek Collaborative Restoration Initiative, which will help reconnect the creek, restore watershed functions, and improve water quality for the surrounding habitats and communities. Secretary Haaland then traveled to Missouri, where she highlighted investments from the Investing in America agenda to address legacy pollution. Missouri has received more than $16 million to address abandoned mine lands and begin work assessing and inventorying thousands of orphaned oil and gas wells. During a visit to Gateway Arch National Park, Secretary Haaland announced a new $17 million investment from the Great American Outdoors Act that will enable the park to continue restoration of the old courthouse, the site of the first two trials of the pivotal Dred Scott case in 1847 and 1850. Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife and Parks Shannon Estenos visited Puerto Rico last week to highlight how Interior is supporting conservation projects on the island with investments from the Investing in America agenda. The Assistant Secretary traveled to Cabo Rojo, where she joined island leaders to celebrate a $5 million grant from the America the Beautiful Challenge to restore coastal habitats and resilience of the salt flats at the Cabo Rojo National Wildlife Refuge. She also joined leaders from the Conservation Trust of Puerto Rico to tour various sites in southwest Puerto Rico, being protected and preserved for their ecological or historical significance. Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management Dr. Steve Felgus, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management Director Elizabeth Klein, and Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement Deputy Director Paul Huang were in Brownsville, Texas this week, touring the wind turbine installation vessel Charybdis, currently under construction. Once complete, the vessel will be based out of Hampton Roads, Virginia, and will support the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Commercial Project approved by Interior last fall. Interior this week announced its proposal for a second offshore wind energy auction in the Gulf of Mexico. The proposed lease sale includes 4 areas offshore Louisiana and Texas, totaling more than 400,000 acres, which have the potential to power 1.2 million homes. The announcement is part of the administration's commitment to expand offshore wind opportunities, building on investments made by the president's Investing in America agenda to develop a clean energy economy, create good-paying jobs for American workers, and make our communities more resilient. A signing ceremony was held this week at Redwood National Park in California, featuring the National Park Service, the Yurok Tribe, the California Department of Parks and Recreation, and the Save the Redwoods League. The Park Service is transferring a 125-acre ecologically and culturally important property back to the Yurok Tribe, its original steward. It's the first ever cooperative arrangement for the National Park Service and California State Parks on tribally owned land. While celebrating Women's History Month, Secretary Haaland this week visited the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site in Washington, D.C. The first in her family born free, Bethune was an abolitionist and trailblazer for black women's education and influence in national politics. As the founding president of the National Council of Negro Women, stationed at the Council House, Bethune advised numerous presidents, including President Franklin Roosevelt, and helped lay the groundwork for the modern civil rights movement. And our social media picture of the week, they're back. The world-famous cherry blossoms of Washington, D.C. burst into bloom this week at the Tidal Basin and along the National Mall about a week earlier than predicted after mild late winter weather in the nation's capital. This year's National Cherry Blossom Festival runs through April 14th. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.
Happy World Water Day. Bureaus across the Department of the Interior are working hard to advance water-related priorities both within the United States and internationally, utilizing their world-class scientific and technical expertise. Every day, I get to work closely with United States Geological Survey Director David Applegate and Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Camille Kalimlim Tootin to advance the Biden-Harris administration's priorities for water. Our reality is clear. The climate crisis and pervasive drought threaten the water resources we all depend on. But thanks to President Biden's Investing in America agenda, we are delivering historic funding to the communities who need it most. This work is grounded in the best available science. For example, the USGS scientists provide world-class science and modeling to support responsible stewardship of our vital freshwater resources. Reclamation rural water projects funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will serve more than 800,000 people in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, and New Mexico when complete. Beyond our borders, in 2023, experts from both bureaus supported capacity building and provided technical assistance to key partners such as Brazil on reservoir management and water resources challenges, and much more. These are just some of the exciting water-related efforts happening in our bureaus, but I'll let the director and the commissioner share some of the projects they're most proud of.
At the Bureau of Reclamation, we understand the importance of having a safe and reliable water supply. A sustainable supply allows for continued peace and prosperity to the communities we serve in the American West. Established in 1902, Reclamation is best known for the dams, power plants, and canals it constructed and operates in the western United States. These serve as the water and power infrastructure backbone of the American West. It is how we meet our mission as a global leader in water management and power production, and being stewards of our environment. Our success lies in the strength of our partnerships with sovereign nations, states, water managers, farmers, irrigators, and other stakeholders. The solution for the water challenges of today and into the future must be rooted in the best available science, engineering practices, and continued partnership with all of you. This is our pledge today and our promise to the future.
As one of the largest providers of water data in the world, the USGS is committed to observing, understanding, predicting, and delivering information on the nation's water resources. Every day, not just on World Water Day, our scientists work with partners across the country to monitor and conduct research on a wide range of water resources and conditions, including stream flow, groundwater, water quality, and water use and availability. In response to the need for more extensive observational data throughout the nation, the USGS has developed the next generation water observing system. The USGS is working with university and private sector partners to conduct research and develop innovative water monitoring technologies, such as remote sensing and imagery-based techniques. The USGS has more exciting water science information coming soon. In early 2025, we'll release the Integrated Water Availability Assessments National Report. It is the first comprehensive, integrated scientific assessment of water availability in the United States since 1978. Prior assessments relied on data only from locations where water was directly monitored, but the new assessment uses state-of-the-art models to fill in the gaps between monitoring locations. You can find a world of water information at www.usgs.gov.
Thank you. And from all of us at the Department of the Interior,
Happy World Water Day!